Okay, so here's a couple stacks of uh, ephemera, paper printed objects of another era, another epoch, a bygone epoch, maybe or maybe not. Um, and I am just going to start with a little Inty Beansy flyer from probably like the first real underground break-in rave that completely was the conversion moment for me. This was Orc Community. I don't know how well this card is a little bit small to read, but so this is a tiny flyer, nothing on the back, just a tiny handout from. This one was for the things they did on Folsom Street, I think, but this basic crew: Garth, Ernie, Yano, Martin Sharp, I think. No, Martin from UK. A bunch of these guys came over from the UK. They did beach parties in Brighton. They were part of a sound system, the name of which I'm blanking out on. There was a Sugar Lump sound system, and there was another one that these guys were part of. And they basically formed one of the kind of big groupings or poles of the San Francisco early rave scene. So Community did this crazy break-in warehouse party down in the warehouse district of San Francisco, and it was kind of mind-bending. So Community, so that was Maliki also, who later became crippled from an injury in a truck with a sound system. And there was a guy named Jason, also another English bloke, who did some of their propaganda and through some of their other smaller club-like events. And there's a whole bunch more people in that network whose names I don't necessarily know. Maybe we'll see a few more of them in a minute. Somewhere into the early 90s, an early bulletin board formed with, I guess you could say, led by Brian Behlendorf, who is now kind of a hot potato in the Linux computer scene. So they had SF Raves, was electronic mailing list where you could like get updates on all the latest parties going on everywhere. This is before the web, before Netscape Navigator even. Like I would say, this is 92, maybe 91, 93, somewhere in that zone. Physical invite flyer. These guys really were sort of a predecessor of kind of the Burning Man and parts of the rave experience, Crash Worship. They were a crazy underground punk, goth, industrial percussion band, sort of like a US version a little bit of Einstürzende Neubauten, you could say. All percussion. They would throw all kinds of crazy liquids and stuff and burn stuff, and had kind of out of control events that were kind of, felt a little bit risky. I don't know how risky they really were, but they were kind of pagan. A bunch of guys, no shirts, banging on drums and steel and metal and crazy shit like that. So this is probably from the late 80s, early 90s, guessing. Crash Worship. They were not really a rave or a techno act per se, but they're like an independent DIY band that fed into all of that in terms of the energy. This is an object newsprint publication from Mark Haley, who's the guy who brought the Toontown parties to San Francisco and was also part of that whole UK scene, and was one of the early people to come over to San Fran and kind of really had a bigger picture in mind. It wasn't just about the music, the beats, and the drugs. I had a little article in here, a little spiel on sacred dance. He had a thing on a Chinese organic architect out in Berkeley. Opens up into a big centerfold about global change. Dance the new reality into existence. So I don't know if we can get a wide view here. Pull back. So it's, big newsprint, fold out, thingamajig, different articles, global change and practical reality, evolution, individual global evolution, Earth changes in what we can do. People need to know that the fear has got to go. Quote from Jose Arguelles, Hakim Bey, Heather Jones, Jose Arguelles again, Chief Seattle, Alan Watts. Those basically kind of like somewhat self-conscious Hate Street version 2.0, Popular Morganics by a guy named Morgan Brent, who went deep into ayahuasca in later years. A couple ads. So that was a cool little zine that came out. It was given out more or less free on Haight Street in a certain period. This thing. This is a zine, like a manifesto that I did under my AKA Cinnamon Twist, that sold about 1,000 copies, mostly on Haight Street. Gave a lot of them away at underground parties, outdoor parties. Utopia or bust, that was my closing statement. Had some cool little rubber stamp art integrated into the design. Kind of predictable, psychedelic, wavy stuff. Okay, yep. Dream vision, this is a little, this is an actual description of a dream that I had back in like '89, around the time my mom died, before I came back out to California from the East Coast. So there were all these different little groupings, crews, I guess sound system crews, you would say. So before we go back to the community guys, this is Spaz. So that was Jen and Aaron primarily, with a changing cluster of folks around them. Semi-permanent autonomous zone. So they had a lot of close encounters with the festival scene in England, and did a lot of very edgy, they went kind of dark, industrial, experimental kind of direction. Kind of a, not really house music. This is a pretty cool fold-out flyer thingy. I don't know how much of the detail we can get, but kind of got a little crop circle action in there, a little cymatics, little cartoony guy. This is pretty cool, actually. And then more informational stuff on the other side. So yeah, so they did sort of more like, I would say, dark underground parties. Your Sister's House, another kind of overlapping group. These ladies, it was all women DJ collective. Your Sister's House, very early, 91, 92, 93 maybe, that general zone. So yeah, they mainly did small club nights and stuff, but occasionally an underground thingamajig. Really great group of women. Okay, and then we have the obligatory Goa Gill, who's the eternal Goa DJ of global fame. This was an early party. Goa Gill, yeah, one of the pioneers of the psytrance or Goa trance sound. We get your little there were a bunch of these, not billions, but a few dozen of these sort of general spiritual aspirational statements, leaflets, proclamations. I don't know who did this one in particular. State of the Nation, Ministry of Love. So who exactly that was, I'm not sure. Kind of anonymous. Yeah, going back to the community crew, here's a nice little flyer that sort of made an impression on a lot of people, and me included. House music and planetary healing, so sort of a statement of intention in a way for the more idealistic wing of the psychedelic dance underground scene. I won't bother reading it, goes on for a while. Here's just a informational statement from the same period from Ministry of Love about speed. Beware of speed. Here's another little flyer for a Goa party. Let's see, Goa Gill and Friends. And not sure where this was, if this was up at, this is the Flop House. This is a Flop House party, which we're going to get to in a second. We got a flyer from the Flop House. Here we have another sort of parallel overlapping scene or network. You've got Hakim Bey's Temporary Autonomous Zone, sort of a visionary Sufi anarcho writer, Peter Lamborn Wilson, aka Hakim Bey, with Robert Anton Wilson, Nick Herbert, physicist, and I don't know who this other guy Joseph Matheny is, but Rob Bresney, who most people will probably recognize, even if they don't know his stuff that well. This is organized by Commotion International, and they had a space over on 16th Street back then. This is pretty cool back flyer art. Chaos never died. That's one of Hocking Bay's favorite slogans. And we get to the obligatory Toontown. Oh, sorry, this is a little effed up, this flyer, but UFOs are real. With Moby, Joey Beltram, Kevin Sanderson, Yano, Doc Martin, Nikki Rivera, Pete Avila, Marky Mark, Space-Time Continuum. Oh yeah, so that's Jonah, Space-Time Continuum, another one of those Brit guys who's pretty important, independent producer. Don't know exactly when this one happened. This was like 90, 91, something like that. Supernova, I don't know much about this. Another Toontown flyer. So Mark Haley, he kind of deserves his own subsection, or should be doing this as a sort of like dialogue, really. But yeah, he threw these giant, they became pretty huge, some of the more ambitious and bigger ones. He did a New Year's party, New Year's Toontown. This might be the New Year's to one of them here. And he was hooked in with a Mondo crowd. He was hooked into VR. Smart drugs were being kind of promulgated around in tandem with all of this groovy stuff by people like Nisa, later Lux Dakota Foxglove. And here we have Mr. Floppy's was a former house of prostitutes in Oakland, kind of risky neighborhood of Oakland. So some pretty cool stuff happened there. It was just a long, winding, kind of weird amalgam of different structures. You could kind of get lost in there. There were lots of different small rooms. And my best experience there was seeing Psychic TV play live on a full moon night, which we'll get to in a sec. And then we got here this is another Toontown extravaganza, Toontown and Progeny, and the Shaman, who are, kind of hot crossover band, techno act back then. Some people may remember them. Here's a flyer from the Rhythm Society and Stompy. I forget who. Stompy was just another one of the promoters in those days. So, we get some infiltration of the kind of visionary thinkers from the 60s and 70s, the psychedelic gurus, Tim Leary, Robert Anton Wilson. Here's another related event, Tim Leary. And another flyer for Mr. Floppy's. This is actually, I think, the first flyer that I saw on a pole somewhere in the Lower Haight for a Floppy's party, and was kind of impressed by the design because it's the typography a little bit. Pretty cool. Managed to save a copy. Brad is a cool guy I haven't had anything to do with in a billion years. He had, I don't know, there's a whole long backstory there. Mr. Floppy's bus. This is a cool map point flyer that illustrates the concept of the map point, where if you weren't part of that scene or haven't heard about it from your older bros or sisters, generally couldn't get to the event location directly. You had to meet up at a certain designated spot, and from there you would get a further set of directions, and or hop on a shuttle or in the back of a van or whatever to get to the actual event location, because generally they were avoiding being busted, so had to be on the down low, etc. Here we have another kind of informational, aspirational statement from the community crowd. I think it looks like from those same guys. Yeah, house movement, shamanism, community, human family, dissolve barriers, open your minds, ancient tribal wisdom, and deconditioning and deprogramming. And here's a flyer from Martin's network, which is kind of the community network, or print an invite, I guess, more like in sort of a different format, something kind of you got in the mail. So now we get to Amoeba. So this is Mark Metz's shop that he had in Upper Haight. He had a funky clothing shop, always emanating Nag Champa incense, like for blocks around. You could smell it. You knew you were heading in the right direction. So Amoeba became like one of the primary networking nodes for the incipient rave scene of San Francisco. So they sold these cool psychedelic threads. They sold bits of music, I think, other accoutrements, and they had their own little flyers and statements they put out. They were connected to Psychic TV, so some of their fashion designs were related to, spun off from Psychic TV somehow. And anyway, basically it was one of the best places to pick up flyers to know what was going on a given weekend, like where the party action was going to be. So yeah, they had this one print in particular right here that was on a lot of their stuff. This is sort of like a, vaguely Psychic TV, Crowley, Crowleyan shtick. Some of their outfits and stuff like that. So yeah, that was an important node in the subculture. Here we got, speaking of Psychic TV, we got a flyer for Genesis Peorage performance with Craig, I think was XKP Lighting. I forget Craig's last name. Transmedia Litany. Don't know exactly what year this was, sorry. Okay, and then we get to some more miscellaneous Temple of Psychic Youth and Psychic TV propaganda items. Here's another little flyer for another one of their event. Burn all your flags. Check. Okay. So we get this is a flyer I inherited from my former housemate Mark, who was a Temple of Psychic Youth initiate. And although he kind of bailed on the 22nd month, and you had to make it all the way through the 23rd month, I think, to be a full initiate. Abolish fear, establish trust. And then this is another one. I think he did this design. Mark did this design, and I'm not going to use Mark's name for the moment in case he still wishes to remain anonymous. That's a dream. It's a dream machine in the middle there. Temple of Psychic Youth was a spin-off Operation OTO's variant Chaos Magic, basically run by Genesis Peorage, and they had a global network of sort of punk. I don't know what I mean. I don't want to typify them too much because that's a whole longer story. But so here are some graphics. More Genesis Peorage performance, Transmedia Litany, Ambient Indoctrination. Okay, this was a big deal. Maybe these next two. This was a hot event, which I'm embarrassed to say I did not actually make it to myself. The Cyborganic Being. Don't drink the water was the sort of threat or promise or slogan. It was at Floppy's. So I caught them on a separate occasion. I don't think I was at this one, but maybe I was. Who knows? And then here's another cool one with G. Peorage. Space-Time Continuum, Marky Mark, Fred, Hyperdelic, blah, blah, blah. That was 92. So we're kind of advancing a little bit into the time frame here. Let's see what else we got. Oh yeah, yet more Psychic TV propaganda, lecture, Genesis Peorage. So yeah, Ultra House, Acid House, the Psychic TV shifted early on. They were always doing this industrial electronic experimentation, extremely aggressive, disturbing noise and psychic stuff, and using psychedelics, and they kind of they were part of the early jumpstart of the Acid House scene in the UK, I would say. So here we mentioned Mark Metz a few minutes ago. It's Mark Metz on the cover of Image Magazine, which was a weekly magazine from SF Chronicle. Inside SF's New Rave Underground, yes. So this was a big splashy article, gave people some initial kind of coverage and attention. Ecstatic, cybernetic, acid test, yes, groovy, groovy, groovy. Beautiful, optimistic, open-hearted ravers mixing their bodily fluids, drinking smart drinks, sweating all over the place, getting down, everybody. Perfect viral vectors, except there wasn't really any, well, there was HIV back in those days, still floating around, so not to be made too light of. Here's some old newspaper stories about the beginnings of the scene, maybe of some interest. Here's like a clutch of the critters that started it. Sorry, I don't know if the visual's getting that good at this point. This is on the smart drugs scene. Are converts to energy products getting smart or getting scammed? Psychic Sarah, Little Steven, Galactic Greg, Nisa Griffith, Michelle Barnett, and Timothy Dean Lee. Well, whatever, okay. Let's see who else we got here. We got this pretty cool cover, SF Weekly. Big story. Acid, you've tried the drug, now dance to the music. Rants and raves about the new psychedelia. Woohoo! Okay, yep. Here's just some more news media coverage. FWIW, maybe not that much interest inherently at this point, except to academic types and weird archivists. Let's see if we've got a few more random things in here. Smart Duds, okay, that's an allusion to Amoeba again. Party. This is Spiral Tribe, who kind of tried coming over to the US but didn't really get anything. They were kind of infamous in the UK for doing big, massive outdoor free festivals, essentially. Somebody got Psychic TV, who were run out of England on suspicious charges. Let's say, without going into detail, just a bunch of other small clippings. So, yeah. So I don't know if you're exhausted yet, but let's see. I'll just kind of like breeze through a few other pieces of documentation here. Ephemera. This is basically a flyer from England, Guildford Information News Sheet. So they did this thing around the same time. The UK rave scene got kind of, was a little too wild for some people. So they basically tried to suppress it with this thing called the Criminal Justice Bill. And there were lots of protests and actions against the Criminal Justice Bill. And actually, this is a pretty fucking cool graphic, I would say. Probably worth doing something with again someday. Also, evidence from the UK. This is Whirligig. This is one of the cooler long-running events that was sort of kind of hippie rave crossover scene. I'm trying to see if I recognize anybody on here. DJ Monkey Pilot. This scene, they basically had a couple big halls that they would do like regular monthly or I think events, and they would have massive parachute in the ceiling, and the parachute would drop down and cover everybody at the end of the party, like as the dawn was coming up. So Fraser Clark over in UK was pretty intimately involved with this nexus of people, and also the Planet Dog Records were really hooked in too. So it's kind of like this hippie festival rave crossover vibe. We got a couple flyers here from, let's see, Funky Techno Tribe. This is probably in SoCal, LA. Not really hugely interesting. Maybe more on point. We have an old Narnia flyer. So Narnia was a big outdoor festival in the mid-90s, I would say, that ran for a while, put on by some of those guys. Some of those cats that went on to do EDC, I think Electric Daisy Carnival, if I'm not mistaken. Shiva's Erotic Banquet. This is one of the blowout, most infamous events in LA in the early 90s. Friends of mine went to it, but it was before I came down to LA myself. From the creators of Aphrodite's Temple. So I used to know the people that did this, but I am blanking out on the name. So they had Timothy Leary and Psychic TV do this one. That's pretty rad, huh? That was a pretty mad event from all reports. This is just a kind of a zine flyer with a bunch of music reviews from the early to mid 90s. Don't really know exactly what's in it. Just kind of one of those things. We got here Evolution, Resolution, SoCal Together, New Year's Eve Party 95. And we got some other random stuff. Probably some of this is more from SoCal. Less interesting to Northern California people, but still it's part of history. Early Galactic Bean flyer. So the Mayan calendar was a kind of very trending meme through like the mid to late 90s. Sorry, I want to say 90s. Oh, aughts, 2000s. Excuse me. We're in the 2000s now, most definitely. So this is from the BC crew, Tribal Harmonics, and their whole network of folks in Elphinstone, Mount Elphinstone, outside of Vancouver, very right across the bay. They did super grassroots, super conscious, super hippie, very, very cool nexus, basically, of people and ideas and stuff. This is big, splashy fucking Narnia flyer, fold out. I see we're getting some shadow from our thing here, so we're gonna burn through the rest of this pretty fast. More amoeba. This is a Spaceship Gaia sound system, or Spaceship Gaia, which was Steve from Santa Cruz. Aughts again. Early issue of Accelerator magazine when it was still in its frickin' newsprint phase. I don't know how early this one is, but pretty early. Long forgotten, but important for the sort of cybernetic kind of lead up to the Acid House and Rave and Burning Man scene. Fringeware Review. It's kind of a big compilation of lots of cutting edge underground information. Bridge Festival happened in '91 at Stanford, where I met some people who will be later important down here in LA. This is a zine, a sort of a celebration of all things acid, Lysergic World. Only one issue of this ever came out. Celebrating the 50th anniversary. That's from '93. Went through some of those. This is way more recent. This is 2012, Symbiosis on Pyramid Lake. Managed to make that one. So right next to Black Rock Desert. Was a pretty awesome festival. I always said the second best thing to Burning Man itself. Lastly, for this little tour, we got a big ass poster of Narnia Party from, don't know the year on this one, so sorry, not that academic, but big and splashy anyway. Cool poster. Yeah, so that's like a little tour. It may give you a taste of some of the people and elements and propaganda from those days. Over and out.